Hello and welcome. Today, a little bit about stamp margins of the stamps of Germany, particularly during the inflation period. So let us get started. Here, the two basic printings are rotary on the left and flat plate printing on the right, recognizable by their margins. Flat plate, basically bare, and rotary always has such lines in different configurations, as we will see as we go on. And they all have a meaning, and they all do have a little bit of value too, in some cases, quite a bit of value. In this video, yes, I use the Germany Specialized Michel catalog. Certain sheet margins add to the stamp value. In this video, all values for stamps and margins are in mint not hinged condition. Also, various stamps were printed in rotary as well as in flat plate printing. Stamps issued in 1920, these particular ones that you see now, where the single stamp catalogs $1, but the stamp with a top margin catalogs $30. Yeah, this one is pretty dramatic, the difference, but many of them are not so dramatic and some are enormously dramatic. Those I don't unfortunately have, typically. Here are three different catalog values. Again, stamps issued in 1920. A single stamp is $1. With the left top margin, $20, and the right top margin, $15. Oh, that seems strange, doesn't it? Well, let's investigate that a little bit closer. Here we are. Two different margins. Long and short lines compose the margins in different combinations. Left, the orange red calculates as 1 and then 4 short ones and then 1 long again. And the Carmen lilac on the left is 1 long, 5 short, and another long. And on the right, the orange red does only exist in short strokes, 5 of them, and 0 long ones on both ends. So basically, in a specialized catalog, you will see it written up like this here on the bottom right. For the left margin 141/151, and on the right stamp 050/151. This is the typical way it is listed in the catalog. And these numbers vary from stamp sheet to stamp sheet and value to value. So many differences are out there. And I can only show a few because that's all I have available at the moment. But that's basically what we're looking at. And here we have actually a combination of two different margins together and in a nice pair. So that's a nice way to collect. And the reason why, well, I'll show you a little bit later. Yeah, here again, I blew it up and showed you the same situation again. Orange, red, and here the lilac, and same here. Well, maybe a little confusing, but once you try one, you get the hang of it right away. I'm sure of that. You're all very smart out there, so uh, maybe you don't need an explanation of this stuff. But anyways, I have to put something in the video. So here we go. And here it shows you a little bit why there are differences in the values of the different two top margins, because here we have just 4 of one kind, and here we have 6 of another kind, so 1.5 as many. So therefore, the previous catalog values somewhat correspond to that. Now, sometimes on some sheets, you might only get one, like I show up here on the upper left, and all 9 are the same of a different style or different lines. So then the catalog values can dramatically be high on that single one. So yeah, that's basically how it is. This is just the top 2 rows of a sheet, obviously. I don't have the rest of it. Here, similar as before, except these stamps are overprinted. Stamps issued in 1921. Single stamp $1.30, left stamp $14, and the right margin stamp $15. So in this case, not much difference. And that is probably because the basic rotary lines may be more or close to, well, it cannot be any closer to equal, no. Have to be either 5.5 or 6.4 in this case, because like on the basic stamp, the unoverprinted. And here we have stamps issued in 1923. This was, $10 billion stamps. Yeah, isn't that nice? Yeah, unfortunately, they wouldn't even buy a loaf of bread at that time. Stamps on 1923, single stamp $1.40 with top margin, and here the top margins are all identical at $8, and they have also bottom margins with the stripes, all the same format, $1.60. So not much more on the bottom margin than a single stamp. So nice to have the top margins, more interesting and better opportunity for value. And here, stamps issued in 1922 were single catalogs $1.20 with the left top margin $42 and the right top margin $5.50. And here we have a good example where, in this, I know what the sheet looks like. I used to have many of these in full sheets. We only have one of the style in the upper left here with the 3 vertical big ones and then the small ones in the middle. And then the rest, the 9 that follow, are of this style right here. And that's why the difference in value, you can see, is reasonably dramatic on this one. The color, the stamp is of 2 colors actually. It's kind of a purple in the background here, and in some of the other design, the post tone is white and the margins are white. And the purple, you can see the lines here on the left and the right, top and bottom. But it did not come out very distinct, very faint, in fact. And the dark green basically nearly, in some cases, cover the purple. So they cannot be seen very clearly. But here you can see a little bit sticking out of the purple. Every time there is a stamp in rotary printing, such as this, in two colors, and that's all they use basically, up to two colors or single color. The rotary lines on the margins are always in both colors, whereas a single color stamp of rotary printing, it only comes in one color. The lines just in the same color as the stamp. And now we get into the flat plate printing, a stamp issued in 1922. A single stamp here is $1, and with the top margin $1.50. Yes, not much difference in value here, but still more than just a single stamp. So keep that in mind. You're always better off with the margin than without the margin. And this again is a flat plate printing, also issued in 1922. A single stamp, catalogs at $1.20, with top margin at $3.50. Advertising on the right margin is not valued in the catalog. However, it is an interesting way to also collect full sheets because these advertisings do differ. There are, I don't know how many different kinds, but several. So, anyways, if this particular issue with this watermark network was of the rotary printing, the ones with the lines, the value here would be very dramatically different at $250 for a top margin copy. So that is quite substantial, but yeah, catalog values are very high because not easy to find those. That's why. Yeah, scarce. So if you have one, feel yourself lucky. And another aspect of collecting margins or variations of such, a single stamp in this case is $1 with top margin at $2.80 on either one of these blocks. However, the perforation that goes through the left margin or the right margin, a single stamp with that margin, just like one item here where I draw my cursor, catalogs $15 because most of the stamp sheets of this issue were issued with margins not perforated through, such as this item on the left. So more stuff to look for. Isn't that fun? Yeah, well, it really is. And okay, a little explanation of the numbers on the sheet of stamps. Here, the vertical row shows the total. A full sheet of this stamp size is of 100 stamps. So 10 horizontally and 10 vertically. So the vertical row total is obviously the 10 stamps in the first vertical line, and the second 8, and then 12, and so on down the line until it gets to 40. And these numbers are called the summation numbers, which are not valued in the catalog, but that's what they stand for. In other words, this stamp is 40 pfennig, then these two would be 80, and then the next one down would be a 1 mark 20, and so on down the line. They just keep adding on. And so all these numbers mean something, especially to the postal clerk when somebody comes at the counter and wants, let's say 20 of this stamp here, then, at a glance he can pull out or tear off a block and by these numbers know exactly almost immediately what the total is without having to multiply anything or stuff like that. So at least that's what I feel was the purpose here. Yeah, catalog values, as already mentioned, are for mint not hinged, including mint not hinged margins. Many other things, however, factor in, such as stamp color, plate flaws, and more. Genuinely used margin stamps typically value much higher, and some very dramatically higher. And I really mean that. If you look in the appropriate catalog and look at some of the values, yeah, very, very dramatic. This video covers just a few easier to remember variations. Now, try to keep it simple, but I realize, sometimes things can get confusing. Even for me, sometimes I'm confused. Yeah, nothing unusual. Yeah. Okay. Here again, we have a single stamp at 120 with top margin at 250. And in this case, we need a pair to get the full order number. And that catalogs a pair and that 2 pieces of bottom margin, $6. And these order numbers, yes, they do vary in value. Even for the same stamp, there may be, 3, 4, 5, something like that. Sometimes not, only 1 or 2 different numbers because they were issued, then reissued, and reissued again and again because of demand. Okay, so that's why there may be different numbers, and they do carry different values generally. So again, I already mentioned the vertical row total amount. This would be row 3, and 10 times 30 times 10 would be 3 mark, and then 4 mark, and so on. And then we have the vertical row number 1 through 10. Here we have 5 and 6, and that actually just tells you what row you're in. Again, I think it helps calculate when sheets are separated into smaller amounts for the customer at the post office for easier calculation. And here we have another denomination, 35 pfennig, single stamp, $1, with order number $10 and a plate number $2. And again, these all can change with the issue at hand, and so on and so forth. So the order number basically consists of three components, which are right here. The year date, 1918, up here. The order number actually is right here. And the H, or sometimes on some sheets, HAN, is short for order number, as it would be for the German word. So order number is just a translation. And down here is the plate number. Yeah, it can be on the side margin, could be typically on the bottom, as normally the order number would also be typically on the bottom, and the value given is for the order number being on the bottom, and the catalog states much more scarce in any other position other than the bottom margin. And these short lines, which sometimes you get with the stamp when with attached margin, automatically says I am flat plate printing. So that basically covers this little item. As you can see too, many things to identify just on this little strip of three. And also in this particular case, the stamp itself has not been expertized for color. There are three possible colors, and they do vary dramatically in value, from just $1 to, I think if I remember correctly, $200 or $300 for the best one. So always that possibility as well when you have such item. And another sheet marking, which is actually the sheet number. As they run off, many sheets during the inflation period, because rates changed basically on a weekly basis. And then they used overprints to improvise on already printed leftover sheets from before, such as this one. So sheet number only, and it only appears on rotary printed sheets, not on flat plate printed sheets. For mint, there is no added value, but for used, a minimum of $40. So you can see a mint evidently quite common, because there's still many sheets available out in the marketplace. It's amazing. Sometimes by the stack, So used ones, yeah, that would be a scarce item. But if you keep your eye out, maybe even on a cover, that would even be much better. Yeah. In such conditions, used or on cover, prices can really go up very high. In 1923, at the peak of the inflation, 11 major cities in Germany, with each main postal facility issuing these stamps with their own local overprints, which makes identification a bit more challenging. So let's look at a couple of them. Here, a single stamp only catalogs 70 cents, and a top margin stamp catalogs $7. Some overprints were used in more than one city. Minute differences tell the origin, and sometimes it does take the expertiser to differentiate, because some of them are quite difficult. But sometimes we're in luck, because sometimes they're differentiated by whether the overprint is shiny or is kind of a dull overprint. And those most of us, I'm sure, can tell which is which and then classify it accordingly. Yeah, and here again, a single stamp is 90 cents with top margin $9 and a plate number single right here, this time on the bottom, also a plate 2 at $2. And the row numbers are not listed with any value at all. So at least not in mint condition. And these stamps also issued in 1923. In fact, all of them were. Single stamp 50 cents and with the top margin $4. And here we have all one color stamp, therefore one long. Oh, I made a boo-boo. I can see that already. Not 4, but this is 3, 6, 11. That should have been 11 in the middle here. I apologize. See, talking about getting confused. Here I am. Yep. But anyways, no harm is done. I just caught it. I said, unbelievable I did that, but I did. Okay, off to the next. But see the difference in overprint? You know, some use lines across the top. This one here has huge bold numbers over the previous value numbers, which were for the sheet of 100 times 200, 20,000 marks, and now 250,000 marks overprinted on that stamp. Now we're looking at what, $25 million for the total sheet. Yeah, wow. Yeah, it would be nice to have that one ourselves, huh? That much money. Wow. Okay. And here are stamps again of 1923. Actually, I didn't have to write that. They're all 1923. A single stamp $1, left margin $25. 292. Okay, this time I got it right. The stripes 292 and 111. Okay, I lucked out on that. And the right margin stamp at $4. So you can see there too you have in the number 1 position on the upper left just a single stamp with the odd margin, and all the other 9 of the sheet are of the same margin, hence the lower catalog value. Yeah, these are only a few basic examples of identifying margin characteristics and some of their values. Numerous top margin stamps are listed with, as already mentioned, astounding values, but also in mint not hinged condition or mint condition even. Yes, a specialized catalog is essential collecting this area in detail. I hope this information at least helped a little and was not too confusing. Many top margin stamps from early on to modern stamps are also listed in the Germany Specialized Catalog. And yes, even some of the modern ones, let's say out of the early 1950s, for example, or even before, the post-war stamps, stuff like that. Yeah, some values are an eye-opener as well because some are scarce and do carry a decent value. So hopefully don't take them off. If you have margin stamps, I know they fit better in the album, but you maintain better value by keeping the margins intact. And I'm sure you do. You're all very sophisticated philatelists out there. I know you are. I know, I can tell by the comments. Yeah. Okay, this one was issued in 1926 in mint not hinged condition, a single stamp. Yes, you can see this one really is up in value, $190, and with a top margin over double at 400. So I think that's good enough reason, having a stamp like this, to keep that margin on there. Yeah, don't fold it over either, because once they're folded, they also diminish in value. So keeping them crisp, I feel myself, that's just my personal feeling, I think is a nice way to go. Yeah. And in this case, by the way, the used example is quite a bit less. In this case, the mint not hinged um, is better, because many of these stamps were used in the mail, whereas the previous inflation stamps, like I said, the rates changed so rapidly that many got used up, but many, many more were left over. And that's why inflation sheets are still readily available in, auction houses or dealers or stuff like that. Well, that's it for this video. It came out a little bit longer than I was planning on, but sometimes this is how it goes, and sometimes they're shorter, so it varies. And I didn't want to mix other stuff in with this, so uh, anyways, I thank you very much for watching. So see you the next time. And yes, again, sometimes stamps with margins, and I'm sure Germany is no exception. I believe most countries in the world, when you have any of their stamps with a little margin, I think adds optically, and usually, I feel, probably also a little bit in value. But I don't have those kind of specialized catalogs, so I cannot really tell for sure. But I would leave them on. If I get them, I always leave them on. So, wishing you all good success, and above all, good health. My channel, Stamp Space, My Fun Things.